Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Homeowners Informational Meeting. We're delighted to have everybody here. I have a couple of housekeeping items before we begin today. First of all, thanks again for attending and taking your time out of your day. This is being live streamed. In addition to that, a video will be available on YouTube for anybody that wishes to watch it again and again. In addition to that, we'd also like to thank everybody for submitting their questions. We got an enormous amount of questions. So we're going to answer some of them today, but at the tomorrow we'll go and send out an email with all the questions and answers that we've received. So you can expect to see that probably tomorrow afternoon. In addition to that, a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about today, or at least that I'm going to talk about, is repetitive. You've seen most of the information in the summer meeting last year, 2019, and then also in December at the annual meeting. But I wanted to show it to you again just as a reminder, but then also if we have any new residents that are also joining us, we wanted to also just bring everybody up to date. The other thing that I would just like to ask everybody is that our Condo Cafe, which is our homeowner portal, has all the criers that we've done since February 19th, February 2019 and before. And then also the annual meeting, the full presentation of the annual meeting, and also last year's summer meeting is also included on that portal. So if you want to go back and look at what we said before and you get a little bit more detail, it's right there. Secondly, I'd like to ask everyone just to keep in mind that the challenges that we're going to be talking about was not created by this board. It's something, a good portion of it has been eating away at our infrastructure, at our buildings, since the buildings were built and the site was developed. And we're going to identify some clear latent defects that we have in our buildings. I think that's the bad news. The good news is that we're really working very, very hard at trying to resolve those. And, we've struggled with this for many years. And so our board has taken on a way to try to develop a plan, call in the experts, get their opinions, listen to our community, and then hopefully from there, we'll end up with a great plan that everybody can support. And we're a long way away from that yet. So we just ask you to be patient. We wanted to let everybody know well in advance what we're struggling with, and just so it's clear to everybody in the community. But again, the good news is that we're confronting it, and we're not going to let it get any worse. The other thing that I'd like to just ask is many of us walk, and don't be afraid to engage us if you have questions. And I can say that most of the people in the audience here do walk, and if you have a question, engage the boards and ask them what's going on if you have questions. And we want to hear from you, and we want to hear your input. For example, since we distributed the crier supplement, I've had a great opportunity to sit down with 4 homeowners so far, just to talk a little bit about the situation. And then one gentleman asked me if I would mind taking him on a walk of the site so he could see for himself exactly what we're dealing with. And I got to tell you, quite frankly, I enjoy both of that. So, we're going to have more of those communication sessions in smaller groups. Unfortunately, we can't get everybody together now, and it's a real challenge for us. But I guess the point is there are ways that we can have small groups and discussions. So we're gonna take that on. Secondly, or the last thing is Kingsway is not the only community that is struggling through this. And what's from us talking to other condominium developments and then also with the experts that you're going to hear today, this is not unusual for condominium developments that were developed in the 1980s and 90s. everybody is really struggling, or let's just say many are really struggling. So I just asked the presenters today and our experts to expound on that a little bit, just so people at Kingsway don't think that Kingsway is the only condominium development that is is struggling with some of the situations that we're talking about. I'd just like to remind everybody, and it's pretty obvious, but the meeting is being videotaped, and this will be available to all homeowners. So a little bit about the agenda. I'd like to introduce everybody. We're here actually at the Cape Codder, and we have the big ballroom, but everybody is spread out. Everybody's wearing masks in the whole 9 yards, so even for us it's a challenge, but again, we want to make sure that we get the message out. We'll go over the Kingsway Condo Trust, our mission, strategy, and some of the details behind that. And then the most important part of the meeting is the why. What's going on? And we have some experts here today. We have Barkin Management, who is our property manager. We have Building Enclosure Science, which is an engineering firm out of Providence, Rhode Island. And then we have Schoenecker Property Services, which is out of Boston. And then we'll have a Q&A and then a closing. So with that said, let me introduce, I'll introduce the trustees here. Tom Altomare is here from the Kingsway Condo Trust. Joe Donahue is here listening in. Rufus Jones, Mary Northrup, Phil O'Mara, Norm Constant, Dot, myself, and then, of course, Betsy O'Connor. In addition to that, we have our Kingsway Trust brethren here, Barbara Murphy, Chair, and Mary Avery, and then Steve Krinsman. And then our local team, we got Mike, and then also Megan here as well. So I think you'll probably see some shots occasionally of the audience and that sort of stuff. So like I say, we're delighted to have everybody and as we move forward. So most importantly are the panelists, and we've really sequenced this to have them talk first, and then we'll follow up as far as the condo trust toward the end in terms of our questions, our Q&A. First of all, I'd like to introduce Bill DeShino. Bill is the president and CEO of Barkin Management, our property management partner. He's got 40 years of experience in the property management business. He oversees Barkin's management portfolio of over 30,000 units, being 30,000 condominium units. They've also expanded into Washington, D.C. lately, but they are, very, very extensively here in the Northeast. He's got a Bachelor of Science from Boston College, and he serves on the board of Habitat for Humanity. Next up is Andy Hughes. Andy is our account executive with Barkin Management. He spends once a week with us in Kingsway, helping us manage the business here. He's got 20 years experience in property management, and his focus has been on large capital projects. He's done 12 of them. So he has a lot of good experience to help us along. And then he's got a BA from Assumption College. Mike Aries, Building Enclosure Science. Mike's an engineer. He's got 25 years of architectural design experience and building enclosure technical experience. He's worked on over 40 condominium communities, and his sole focus in the past 12 years is the rehabilitation of condominiums, primarily built in the 80s and 90s. So I think you'll find his presentation very interesting. And then Mike has a BS from Wentworth. And then finally, Eric Churchill. He's Executive Vice President of Schoenecker Property Services. Eric's got 20 years in the building trades and materials distribution and manufacturing. He's delivered 72 building projects in the last 5 years for SPS, and he's currently involved in the planning or has planned over 5,000 condominium homes in terms of rehabilitation. And he's got a BS from Williams College. So with that, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the Condo Trust and our mission, strategy, and some of the details that go behind that, and to try to bring you up to date, because we started this back in May of 2019, and it's certainly been a journey for us. I'd like to remind everybody that Kingsway is a highly complex property. It's almost like a small city. We have a wastewater treatment plant, we have a golf course, we have 456 condominium units. Heatherwood has 191 condominium units, and I believe we have 19 at Admiralty Heights. So it's quite extensive, and it's just like a small city. So as we go and we plan, we want to make sure that we plan with a long range, but also with a focus on trying to address some of the near-term problems that we have. From a strategy standpoint, everything that we do, we establish the facts, define and consider the options, and then take action. So there's a lot of work that goes into just once you see things in the community beginning to happen, there's a lot of stuff in the background that we have taken care of to ensure everything goes the way we expect it to go. So with that said, just in terms of the details of really the strategy of what, and the details of the strategy in terms of what we were implementing, is one of our first things is to provide timely and accurate updates to our homeowners. And sometimes that requires us to inform people before we have all the facts. But if we feel that there is something significant that the community should know about, we're not going to hesitate, and we're going to let you know as soon as we know. And actually, this case is a good example of that. We don't have all the answers yet, but we want to let each and every homeowner know that what we have coming down the pike, and then also that we're taking care of it, and we're trying to figure out how to resolve the issue. Secondly, you know, we've worked very hard at balancing our operating budget this year. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And our goal is to provide stable condominium fee increases, which to us means no higher than the rate of inflation. I mean, these increases of, you know, 6, 7, 8, 9%, and then 2%, and then 5%, it's extremely difficult for people to plan their lives. And so what we're looking at is a long-term perspective so that we don't have surprises in the future. Secondly, you know, we want to create, or we have created and fund a very proactive and ongoing operational plan to maintain the property day to day. I'm going to get into that a little bit, or actually in the Q&A. And then developing a capital plan with the scope, timing, and the cost of all projects. And we have that in progress, and this is really what we're going to talk about today. And then finally, select the best people to work with. So just to take you back in 2019, I actually showed this chart at the summer 2019 summer meeting. And we talked about that time, and the feedback that the board got was that there were growing homeowner concerns in terms of the condition of the property. And people have felt that had lived there for many years that, you know, that it was really going downhill, and that we should really take corrective action. So that's really what started this whole thing. And specifically, people were concerned about the retaining walls. There were retaining walls that were beyond their life and actually beginning to create safety problems. Privacy fences. A lot of people were very upset and actually are still waiting for the privacy fences to be replaced. Of course, the shingles we're going to talk ad nauseum today about. And then in addition to that, just basic maintenance. And for example, you know, plants on buildings and that sort of thing. The good news to all of this is that we have a solid plan for the privacy fences and the basic maintenance and the paving and all of that. The thing that we're really truly struggling with is the retaining walls and the buildings. So with that, we started off and we conducted an infrastructure assessment, and we didn't do it ourselves. We actually invited in experienced contractors or people that specialize in this area. And we went through roadways. We looked at our landscaping. A lot of big changes in that this year because we had a lot of complaints and still get a lot of complaints in terms of the overgrowth of our bushes. And we also looked at the irrigation system. At the end of the day, the roadway and the irrigation system, I thought really actually turned out pretty good. And I think we have a good plan in place for the landscaping, which I'm going to talk a little bit about as well. Now the issue is with our siding. So over the past year, we've enlisted Barkin to help us out. We had a company out of Plymouth, Barnes Consulting Group, that specializes in building forensics that really actually came in last year, I think around May, to do a visual of our privacy fences, gates, retaining walls, and siding and trim. And Barnes actually created the A through F strategy for us. And what that allows us to do is allows us to prioritize, prioritize which fences, which retaining walls, and which gates have to be done first. And it's based on condition. They're independent. They don't know anybody. They just look at the particular item, and then they grade it themselves. In addition to that, we enlisted Building Enclosure Science. You're going to hear from them today, and then SPS. So, with that said, again, this chart was shown at the 2019 meeting. The good news with this is that we've completed, we're probably about 80% done, I would say. But the good news is the operating fund is funded. That means that we can properly take care of the facility each and every day. That means that we're cleaning the storm drains when they need to be cleaned. We're pruning the bushes when they need to be pruned, both front and back of units, and so on and so forth. So, I mean, that's really a really great thing because at least going forward, we know the place is being properly cared for. The thing that we continually struggle with is the insurance, and it's just because we live on Cape Cod, and insurance companies are still struggling there a little bit in terms of the losses that they've received over the last 10 years. In terms of our reserves, our roofs, our roads, the drainage system, the fencing, the gates, the irrigation, and the landscaping, we can handle in our current reserves as well. More good news. The thing that we're having problems with, and that's what we wanted to communicate to you, is that our retaining walls and our siding on the building is a real issue because we have roughly 77% of our retaining walls are going to need to be soon replaced. Okay. The second thing is 81% of our building siding has been graded C, D, or F. Now again, that was a visual, so we enlisted Building Enclosure Science and then also SPS to take a look and to do some more cuts so we could really see what was going on underneath, and they're going to brief you on that. The thing that concerns the board, and we're not engineers, we don't know a lot about building, but we can look at pictures. So on the left side of this particular screen, there was a study by Gorman, Richardson, Lewis Architects in 2016. And the picture that you're looking at on the left-hand side is, and they took probably 50 pictures. And if you page through this report, they pretty much look pretty much like this. So what this depicts is the brown and green on the top, and to the left is the shingle that you see on the outside. And then the tan part on the inside is the actual sheathing or the plywood that is in the structure of your building, and it's before your framing. And then to the right, there's a piece of white thing there. That's the Tyvek, or the weatherproof barrier, which we're going to get a little education on today. The bottom line is that if you look at the GRLA report in 2016, the pictures are pretty significant because they all look like this, and they reported that they found moisture and dampness on that wood part. Now fast forward to 2020, and 2020, now we're experiencing framing, rotting, and water damage. And there's two pictures here. One picture is from Westwoods, and that's it's a garage door. The actual header had to be replaced because the water damage was actually into the structure of the garage. And then to the right is a window that also had water damage underneath it. That was actually on Wildflower. So this is not Kate's Path. This is properties and buildings that were done before the initial build out of the development. So as you can see, there's a huge difference, and that's what concerned the board. So we called in some folks to take a look at it, and they're going to debrief you on that today. The second thing is I just want to talk about retaining walls. We have retaining walls that are clearly at the end of their life, and this happens to be an example. This is on Kate's Path. It was in danger of collapse. Now, I'm not going to say that every retaining wall is in danger of collapse. The point is that we need to address it and develop a plan to address it. But we are doing a proof of concept using an Allen block, which is basically a concrete block. It looks like stone, but it's actually concrete, so it's not prohibitively expensive, and it will last longer than we really care to worry about. So with that said, the operating budget is funded. The capital projects are funded except for siding and retaining walls. And you remember me talking about the siding was the elephant in the tent. And that's what we're trying to address and we're trying to confront. And we just don't feel that we can ignore it anymore. And then in terms of the buildings, water damage is progressing faster than repairs. You saw that with the 2016 pictures versus today. The one thing that I would like to mention is that our good friends from the Kingsway Trust, we are working in collaboration with them, and they're also conducting an evaluation. You'll hear more about that in our September update, but they're looking at buildings, the pool, the irrigation system on the golf course, and the walking paths. So our plan is to explain the why today. What are we saying? And so that every homeowner is educated. And then late September, we hope to have a plan for the repair path forward with a range of numbers. And then also Kingsway Trust will add in their thoughts on pool and the buildings and the golf course and that sort of thing. And then in late October, we'll have hopefully a contractor name and the numbers. And the only thing that I would ask everybody is that just stick with us a little bit. This is a little bit fluid. This is the plan right now, but we reserve the right to change it based on information we receive. But that should at least give you an idea of really what we're trying to do. And again, I would just, before I end, I would just ask everybody, don't please, if you have questions or whatever, and you see us out, engage us. We want to hear from you, and we're residents too. And we're struggling with this whole thing as well. So with that, I'm going to introduce Bill DeShino, CEO of Barkin. Bill, this one right here is forward. This guy right here is forward.
Oh, to move to the next screen?
Yeah, this one.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. And good afternoon, everyone. As Kevin mentioned, I'm Bill DeShino. I'm the president of Barkin Management. I'm pleased to be here today with the board and in their presentation of the assessment of current conditions with the building envelopes at Kingsway Trust to the ownership. As Kevin mentioned, I'm the president and CEO of Barkin. Barkin happens to be the largest manager of condominiums throughout New England. I've been in the business for over 40 years. I think I was involved in my first condominium in 1981. I didn't know how to spell condominium at that time, but I learned a lot about them since. Currently, and I'm going to put up the next screen here, some of the stats on the company so you understand the depth and breadth of the organization. We currently manage just over 200 condominium cooperative and apartment communities comprising just over 30,000 units throughout New England and across metropolitan Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia. Within that portfolio, 160 plus of our clients are all, managed, if you will, or the responsibilities of management is really vested in that their board of trustees, the board of directors, all of which have the fiduciary duty. And I want to reiterate that, the fiduciary duty to preserve and to protect the value of the community for the benefit of each individual owner's investment in their home. Generally your largest asset, and yes, it's a big investment. Well, it's your elected fiduciaries that have the obligation to make sure that that is, at a minimum, preserved so the value is maintained, and ideally, with the marketplace, it's enhanced over a period of time. Our client portfolio runs the gamut from large wood frame suburban townhome communities, very similar to Kingsway, to large high-rise condominiums such as Harbor Towers, 240-story towers, 624 units on the Boston waterfront. So it's a very diverse and large portfolio. Each, whether it's wood frame or a high-rise masonry building, they all have common elements. They all have common elements that over their useful lives need to be repaired, replaced. So what Kingsway is experiencing is simply not unique. It's part of the aging process, the useful life of the common element components of your community. All the clients what all of our clients have in common, again, is the fiduciary duty to maintain the common elements of the community as they go through their useful life cycle. In the instance of Kingsway, as you've heard and you'll learn much more today, the roofs, the siding, the windows, the trim, the decks, the fencing, roadways, sidewalks, amenity spaces, etc. Those are the common elements. They all have a useful life. They all need to be maintained over a period of time and kept in good repair. In my 26 years at Barkin, we've had numerous clients presented with challenges similar in complexity and or scope as the challenge that's currently facing the Kingsway board of substantial repair and or replacement of common elements. And then they have the second challenge of not having adequate reserves to address that need. It's not uncommon. Trust me, I've been in the business 40 years. It happens quite often. Projects that we've been involved with across the portfolio, and so 40 years in the business, I can't tell you how many capital repair and replacement projects Barkin's been involved with, in which they need to partner with the board and the outside professionals. That is something that the Kingsway board has done, and you'll see the benefit of that investment in time and investment in the outside professionals. Some of the major projects we've been involved with in the more recent years, a 300-unit waterfront community in Bristol, Rhode Island called North Farm. Complete envelope renovation of that property. I mentioned earlier, it's not just the wood frame, but also the masonry buildings. Harbor Towers, I think it was 2008, just at the beginning of the recession. Harbor Towers had a replace their central heating and cooling systems and many other building systems, waterproof the exterior, and make extensive enhancements to their common hallways, elevators, and other infrastructure components. I think that was one of the largest, I know that was the largest one that we've ever been involved with. It was a $73 million project. And the impetus for that project was twofold. A, it needed to be done. B, when those owners were comparing the sales prices on units that had turned over a period of time, I think it was over the last 3 or 5 years, again, so that would have been back in the 2004 to 2008 range, what they were getting per square foot as compared to their other condominiums along the Boston waterfront. And they found that they were about 20% behind what those other buildings were realizing. Having undertaken all the work that needed to be done at Harbor Towers and an improving economy, they're back in a much better place. And then the largest wood frame community in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is managed by Barkin. It's been one of my clients in the 26 years I've been there. It's 816 units. It's called Natick Village. And over that period of time, roofs, siding, decks, fencing, a lot of similarities to what the issues are that are being faced by your board at Kingsway. Your board, as fiduciaries of your investment in Kingsway, have undertaken a comprehensive and exhaustive buildings condition survey, which, as you know, has unfortunately revealed a substantial repair and replacement of the building envelopes is necessary, and delaying this work may result in higher costs, probably will result in higher costs. So as your managing agent, as the board's co-fiduciary, we stand shoulder to shoulder with your board. Through this process, as they pursue this process in a very comprehensive and analytical fashion, with the assistance of other professionals, again, other professionals that will make very detailed presentations today about current conditions. So for your community, it's not unusual to find yourself at these crossroads. We've worked with numerous other clients facing the same challenges and have assisted them with the help of outside professionals, taking them through the process into identifying a means to pay for the work to the extent that they don't have adequate reserves, which is generally the case. We applaud the board for their extraordinary efforts to identify, investigate by seeking multiple engineering opinions to analyze and pursue this project. No different than each and every one of you as owners at Kingsway, they too will need to pay their proportionate share of the cost to renovate the building exteriors and other common elements of Kingsway. Again, thereby preserving and enhancing the value of each one of each one of your investments in the overall community. So I thank you for your time. I want to introduce Andy Hughes. Andy is our senior account executive that has been working hand in hand with the board. And Andy, you have the floor, my friend.
Thank you, Bill. I'm Andy Hughes from Barkin Management. I've been working for Kingsway since January of this year. I really just want to introduce myself, for those of you who I haven't met yet. I'm at Kingsway every Wednesday. I work with Megan and Michael and your board. In pre-pandemic times, I'm sure I would have met a lot more of you by now. But I'm the account executive for Barkin. And my current role, I support Megan and Michael and the rest of your management team with the day-to-day operations. I will also work with your board, obviously, on all matters that are related to Kingsway. As for this project in particular, this undertaking, I will be the face of Barkin Management. I will be intimately involved with all aspects of this undertaking. I'll be assisting with funding and financing. I'll be attending all construction meetings, and most importantly, I'll be ensuring that there's proper communication with everyone, with all parties involved throughout this whole process. Megan and Michael do a wonderful job of running the day-to-day. They have their hands full with such a large community, managing the Condo Association as well as the Kingsway Trust Association. So I'll be the boots on the ground, so to speak, for Barkin. I'll be making sure that our management team stays aware of everything that's going on throughout this project and make sure everything goes as smoothly as possible. We'll be answering some questions towards the end of this presentation as well. Thank you very much. I'd like to next introduce Mike Aries from BES, your engineering firm. Mike.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Andy. Thank you to Kevin and the board. We'd like to say thank you for the opportunity to be of service to the owners of the community. We certainly appreciate the owners taking the time today to tune in, to learn about the challenges that the board has been dealing with for the past 4 years, and to better understand the performance that your buildings are currently under. So again, my name is Mike Aries. I work for Building Enclosure Science. I am a consultant for and one of the owners of the company. We are based out of Providence. We have an office in Boston. We are made up of 26 professionals, and they range from architects, structural engineers, material scientists, construction managers, as well as construction estimators. And our sole purpose is the study of the performance, the durability, and the sustainability of building envelopes. A little bit about myself. I come from an architectural background. I have over 25 years of experience, the last 12 of which Kevin touched on a little bit in the beginning of his presentation, has been solely based on condominium communities very similar to Kingsway. So, as was mentioned by Bill, I've been working very closely hand in hand with boards for communities on the Cape and throughout Massachusetts who are dealing with the same struggles that you guys are dealing with the age of your buildings. So the age isn't specific to 30 years old or 40 years old. I work with boards for condominiums that are as young as 10 years old, and typically you don't want to be one of those boards because that's usually a legal case, and in those cases, in those instances, we're brought on as litigation support, where I've been an expert witness for those boards against the developers. So when we work closely with the boards, our intent is to evaluate the overall performance of the buildings as they are, and then develop repair strategies for the board to move forward with. So our agenda for my portion of the presentation is basically to go over our involvement with your project. So essentially, we're going to talk about what the primary objectives were for us. We're going to provide you with a summary of the timeline, and that timeline is going to stretch all the way back to 2016 up to 2020. We're then going to provide you with definitions of technologies to provide you with a little bit of a vocabulary before we get into what our observations are, so you can better understand exactly what we're talking about. Then we'll get into the general observations that we had. We did some resistance testing, so we actually did some water testing of some original windows on site to see how they're performing. We also are going to review the findings of the repairs that were performed over the past 2 years during 2018-2019. We'll provide you with a little bit of statistical data based on all of this information. which will eventually lead us to what our conclusions and recommendations were to the board. So with regard to primary objectives, the board hired us to come in as a third-party independent consulting firm to provide an unbiased opinion based upon our observations and review of previous consultants' reports as well as previous repairs that have been done. So part of that process was for us to go out, get familiar with your property, and we do that by performing a visual observation, taking a visual survey of your buildings. So what we did is we wanted to ensure that we were hitting all of the villages that were either documented by GRLA or weren't. We also wanted to perform water testing to understand how the windows and doors were performing. The thing to remember is that the community is between 20 and 30 years old. The typical lifespan for a window, and you have some decent quality windows, but the lifespan for those windows is about 20 years. After 20 years, they start to break down. And one thing you should know is that eventually all windows will fail. They will begin to leak water. So we wanted to gain better understanding of how they're actually performing at this point in time. And then we have to determine whether the targeted approach that the board has decided to engage in 2018, 2019 was technically sound and financially viable for moving forward. Okay, so recent summary of timeline. Back in 2016, in May, the board hired GRLA to do a condition assessment. Part of that condition assessment was for them to go out and perform a visual survey. What they actually did was they went out, they reviewed 80 units within 10 villages. In June, they went out and they did what we call limited material extraction. So what that is, it's an invasive investigation where they will go out, they will look at complex, detailed areas where roofs may meet walls, windows, and what they'll do is they'll remove the siding, they'll remove the water management system underneath to see how it's performing. So they're going to see, number one, if the installations were done properly, and number two, if it's performing properly. Is there water getting behind the siding? Is the water being managed? Is the water actually getting behind the water management system, the Tyvek, the home wrap, and actually affecting the structure of your buildings? That's the area that's supposed to remain dry. In October 2016, they actually provided their report, their condition assessment report, which ultimately said that based upon their observations and the data that they collected, that they recommended full replacement of the building envelope. Based upon that information, in 2018-2019, the board engaged in a targeted repair approach. So they went about the property, they looked at the worst areas, and they decided we will repair the elevations from one side to the other holistically. And they did this for over a 2-year period. In February of 2020, they pumped the brakes and they said, okay, let's hold. Let's look at the information, the data that we've collected over these past 2 years, because there's a lot of data that they collected by tearing off entire sections of siding along elevation. So there was a wealth of information there that could supplement the GRLA report. In 2019, February, the board decided to get a second opinion and hire BES to come in and do our peer review. So part of our peer review was very similar to GRLA in that what we did was we performed a visual survey. It was actually myself. I went out and I walked the buildings. I actually walked 40 of the buildings within 9 of the villages. And I made sure that I wasn't looking at the same buildings that GRLA did in their report. I wanted to see other buildings, but I wanted to do 40 so that the combination of the two actually gave us a good sampling, approximately 26% of the entire site. We also did water penetration testing during that same month, where we actually did water testing of 6 original windows within 6 different communities. 6 different windows in 6 different communities. And those windows ranged from singles, doubles, triples, casement windows, double hung windows located on the first floor, located on the second floor, and I'll get a little more into that as we get into the presentation. In April, we provided the board with our condition assessment report, which essentially followed up on GRLA's recommendation, which is it does require, the envelope does require full replacement at this point. In July, the board decided to contact a specialty contractor, Schoenecker Property Services, SBS, who has extensive experience in dealing with condominium repairs, and actually engaged them to come out, do another evaluation from a contractor's perspective. And they came out and they also did limited material extraction, and they actually did 29 locations on site. So before we get into our observations, I want to be able to provide you guys with a little bit of a vocabulary so that you can understand what it is that we're talking about. So when we talk about definitions, when I talk about a building enclosure, what I'm actually talking about is doors, windows, walls, roofs, and floors. That is the building envelope. So when we talk about building envelope, it's the skin of the building. Now, the type of wall system that you guys have is what's called a screened wall system. So you have your siding, which keeps the majority of the rainwater out, but it assumes that some rainwater will actually get past that siding and get in between, behind the siding, between the wall and the structure. Now, the important space in between there is called the drainage plane, and that's indicated by the arrows, the red arrows that are actually going down. To the right of the arrows is a dashed blue line. That is your water management system. That is your backup. That's your belt and suspenders. So we assume some water is going to get past the siding. It's going to get into that drainage plane, and that belt and suspenders, that water management system, the weather resistive barrier, is what's supposed to keep your building dry. It's supposed to manage the water out of the wall and away from the building. Rough opening. When I talk about rough opening, I'm talking about the framed opening that your windows and your doors are in. These are the holes in your walls. These are critical areas where they need to be flashed properly. So when we talk about rough openings, we're talking about windows and doors. Weather resistive barrier. A lot of people call it a WRB, and a lot of people are familiar with Tyvek. Tyvek is a type of weather resistive barrier. This is the product that is placed on the sheathing, the structural sheathing of your building. So that structural sheathing can either be oriented strand board, OSB, or it could be plywood. In the case here at Kingsway, you actually have both in place. This is what protects your building, keeps it dry, and manages water out of the wall system and away from the building. Flashing details are an integral component of this, because those are the details that get installed at all the interfaces. So when I say an interface, I'm talking about how a wall interfaces with a window, with a door, how decks interface with walls, how a roof interfaces with a wall. All those areas are critical and need flashing details. Those are what help capture the water, manage it, and get it away from the building. Reverse laps, something we don't want to see. A reverse lap is when you take a lower product and actually install it over an upper product. What that creates is a reverse lap. So when you think how water travels down a wall, you want it to shed away. You want it to shed down to the base of the wall where the flashing details are, and the water gets away from the building. A reverse lap is the opposite of that. Lower material over upper material, and what does it do? It actually captures the water. It collects the water, and it directs the water into the surrounding wall construction. So this is something that we do not want to see on your building. Visual survey. So we're going to get into our general observations. So our visual survey is quantitative. We wanted to go out and see what exactly the conditions were of your building. So we're looking at the siding, which is the cedar shakes, as well as the clapboard siding. We're looking at the wood trim. We're looking at your gutters. We're looking at your windows and doors. We want to see what the condition of all of these components are, because these are the components that keep the water out of your building. And you'll see that what we actually did was as I mentioned, we went out and looked at 40 units. These are the actual units that we went out and took a look at the 9 villages where they reside, and the ages of the buildings right there. So these are some of the general observations that we have. In photo 1, what you'll see is the cedar siding. Now, cedar siding, the thing you got to remember is that the community ranges in age from 20 years to 30 years old. And the cedar siding is going to be in various stages of deterioration. That will be based on the age of the village, and it will also be based on orientation, how it's facing, how the weather is actually hitting it. The thing that's important here that you need to remember is that the average lifespan of cedar shingles or any of these natural products that are on your buildings is approximately 20 to 30 years. So at 20 years, you're at the end of its lifespan. Depending on orientation and how they're installed, you may get further into that. You may get 25 years out of it. But once it starts to reach the end of that lifespan, you see what we have here. So you see shingles starting to cup. You see shingles starting to split and crack. You see them starting to become loose and fall off the building. When this happens, what this does is this allows more water than what was originally anticipated to actually enter into the building, because now you're opening up these gaps. These gaps are getting larger, more bulk water is getting behind the siding, which is why it's important for that water management system, the WRB that I talked about, to ensure that that's installed properly. Because if that's not installed properly and you have those reverse laps or you don't have those flashing details, water is going to be directed into your construction. Photo number 2, what you see is clapboard siding, and in this particular photo you can actually see the clapboard siding is actually starting to bow off the wall. This is typically evidence of water that gets behind the siding, that gets trapped and starts to deteriorate the sheathing that we're talking about, the OSB and the plywood. And what it does is it actually loosens those fasteners that hold the siding in place. So when you get thermal expansion and contraction, winter, summer, products start to move. And when they start to move and there's nothing holding that nail in place because the water has deteriorated your plywood, those nails start to back out. And that's when you start seeing shingles getting loose and falling off on the left, clapboard bowing out on the right. In these photos, you can actually see that. So this is photo number 3, photo number 4. Shingles, you can actually see that the The seam between the shingles has separated and the nail is actually backing out. Same thing you can see on the clapboard side. You can see the nails are actually sticking out almost about an inch off the surface of the clapboard. In photo number 5, you'll see pest infestation, and that's typically when the siding has become soft and starts to rot. You'll see insects start to nest in those locations, and you can see that there are a number of holes in these locations. I should mention that all of these photos are typical of each of the villages that I went into and visited. So I found very similar conditions on almost every unit that I saw in almost every village. Photo number 6 shows penetrations that were going into the wall that weren't properly taken care of. You can see that there's a hole where bulk water can actually enter into. That typically happens at electrical interfaces and or gas meters. One thing that I did notice with regard to flashing details that we talked about. So what you see here is a roof-to-wall interface, and at the base of that wall there should be a flashing kickout. There should be metal flashing installed at the base of that wall so that when water travels down behind the siding, it gets to that flashing detail and it directs the water out onto the roof. There is no flashing detail there. And this is actually systemic throughout the property. You are missing a lot of flashing details where I don't have to go and take off the siding to see that these things are actually missing. So right now in that photo number 7, because you don't have that kick out, water is potentially actually getting underneath the roof shingles and down into the roof structure in that particular location. Number 8 is a common photo of the pine trim that you can see. You can see that it's in various deterioration. You can see that there's a split coming from the end of it. The reason for that is because this trim, when they installed it with field cuts, the field cuts weren't actually primed and treated with paint. They were left exposed. So when you leave products, natural products like that exposed, water has the opportunity to wick in and cause premature deterioration of the product. Number 9, this is at a garage. So when I go out and I do these visual inspections, I'm a bit of an older generation. I don't buy things online. I need to touch and feel things, so that when I'm out and doing these visual inspections, I'm actually pushing on the siding. I'm actually pulling on the trim. I'm pushing down on the vinyl clad windows to see if there is structure there. In this particular instance, I actually pulled that piece of trim off with my hand. I shouldn't have been able to do that. And what you can see there, that black where that arrow is showing, that's rot. That was completely, utterly saturated with water. So there, that framing is completely gone. So at some point during the repairs, they'll have to remove that. That's the structural sheathing that is applied to your wood framing that's completely deteriorated there. Photo number 10 is a close-up of the connection detail for your recreational deck. And what you can see here is that there is a split in the block behind the ledger, so you can see the bolt with the horizontal arrow. And the vertical line that comes down shows you how the block underneath the ledger has split. And that's typical in a lot of the locations for the decks. And that's because there's no flashing details. Again, there's no flashing details at these deck connections. So water is getting in at these deck connections. It's starting to erode around where these fastener locations are, and water is actually getting into the wall. And I've got a couple photos taken during the repairs where you'll actually see this. Windows. As I mentioned, you have good quality windows. So they're a middle grade window. It is a vinyl clad window, and what I mean by a vinyl clad window is it actually has a wood subframe, and the outside is protected by a vinyl cladding. Now, if that vinyl cladding becomes damaged somehow, like in the photo on the left-hand side where there's a crack in it, water has the opportunity to actually get in underneath that vinyl cladding and rot out that wood frame window from the inside. On the right-hand side is a potential failure. What you'll see is moisture actually gets in underneath, and you start to have fungus growing out from the seams of the vinyl window. In a lot of cases, like I said, when you have cracks like that, you can go along and you can actually press on that frame of the window to see if it's stable. In a lot of cases, what I found is that the underlaying frame underneath the vinyl was very soft and very deteriorated, which tells me that a number of the windows on site have actually failed. And typically when a window does fail, water comes down the window where the sill and the jamb meet. That joinery in those corners, like I'm showing right there, that's where the water will start to enter into the surrounding construction. So if we take off the siding below these windows, a telltale sign if a window has actually failed, you'll actually see a plume of rot in the bottom corners of these windows, and I've got a couple photos of those that I'll share with you. So water resistance testing. What we wanted to do, as I mentioned before, is to see how the windows are actually performing. So what we actually do is we go out, we remove the siding underneath the window, we leave the weather protective barrier in place, but we cut it to get underneath, and we cut out the plywood sheathing or the OSB sheathing, because we want to be able to see when we do the test if the water is actually entering behind the weather resistive barrier and or into the wall system. Now the good news with this is that the 6 windows that we tested all performed well. We didn't see any indication of water getting behind the WRB or into the wall system. However, I caution you because we only tested 6 windows. You have approximately 6,600 windows on site. So this is like 9/100ths of 1% of what you actually have on site. And the thing that's important to remember is that if you do have original windows, they are all past. They're past their warranty and they're past their serviceable life at this point. So even though we test them now and they look okay now, that doesn't mean that there isn't the potential for these things to fail a week, a month, a year from now. So here are some of the photos that we have from the data that was collected between 2018 and 2019 with regard to those repairs. Now you'll remember I just told you telltale signs of what happens when a window fails. All right, you get that plume of rot underneath in the corners, and you can actually see in this location all that black staining, microbial growth. Now while no testing was done, it has the appearance of mold. All right, because this is organic stuff. This is eating away at your OSB. So plywood is actually a little more resistant when the water gets to it. What it will do is it will start to delaminate and it will start to crack. OSB turns to bark mulch. So what you're seeing here is staining underneath the window, and I don't know if the people at home can actually see, but if you look at the 2 nails in the horizontal piece of trim that's just above that, you can actually see that those nails have corroded through. There's discoloration that's bleeding through on the trim there, which is an indication that that's been happening for a long period of time. Here's another photo where the water has gotten behind your WRB, your weather resistive barrier, and it's actually started, it's affected the structural sheathing that's put on the framing as well as the framing itself. So this is the worst case scenario that we're talking about. There's a saying, a leak, to an owner, a leak isn't a leak unless they see the leak. But that's not necessarily true, because you could have a leak, it may not enter into your unit. That's the worst possible case. When it actually gets inside of your unit, that's when it's worked its way from the outside all the way in. Worst possible instance at that point. You can see that this has been saturated for quite a while, where it's actually gotten into the wall framing, and all that wall framing at the corner of that building will have to be removed and replaced. Here's another photo. I think it's very similar to a photo that Kevin showed earlier, where again, the water has gotten behind your WRB, your water management system, has actually affected the structural sheathing and the structural framing. All of that needs to be taken out and replaced. This is the worst possible scenario. Another photo below a window where you can see the framing has been affected and the fiberglass insulation. So all that will have to be removed and replaced. And this is what I was talking about, photo 17. This is taken below the recreational deck interface with the building, where because you don't have those flashing details at those connection points, water is actually entering in and getting into the framing that's just below the deck and above these doors. Remember what I was just talking about, water actually getting to the inside surface? This is a perfect example of this. Here's a photo of mold and staining that's actually occurring on the surface of the inside gypsum of somebody's unit. That water has made its way from the outside all the way into the interior gypsum. So, statistical data. What does this all mean? Basically what we did was we took a look at the information gathered from the GRLA invasive as well as the SBS invasive. So altogether what they did was 53 locations. They opened up areas at 53 locations in all 10 villages. So this wasn't specific to the older ones, to the younger ones. This covered the entire community. 15 of 53 locations, or 29%, had exposed wall sheathing. And what I mean by that is when they opened up, when they took the siding off, there was no Tyvek. There was no weather-resistive barrier. It was exposed plywood. You should never have exposed plywood, because remember how I said we expect a little amount of water to get past the siding? Once it does that, and there's nothing there to protect your structure, that's where the rot begins. Missing flashing details. 46% of the locations that were opened had no flashing details whatsoever. These are standard things. These are what we call original construction deficiencies. This has nothing to do with yearly maintenance. This has nothing to do with the repairs that were done over the past 2 years. This is original construction deficiencies. This was doomed from day one. Reverse lapse. So reverse lapse, we had talked about that, right? What happens with the reverse lapse? It collects the water and directs it back into the surrounding construction. 46% of the locations had reverse lapse. So we're not directing water away from the building, we're actually directing water into the building. 46% of the locations. These are random locations too. These weren't areas where there were reports from owners that they had leaks. These were areas that were just randomly chosen. Surface staining, 80% of the locations. Give that some thought. 80% of the locations had surface staining on the plywood or the OSB. That should never happen. Water should never get to that point. Structurally rotted sheathing and framing, 38%. So 80%, you're already stained. The water is already starting to affect you. Now that staining doesn't necessarily mean that you have to remove the plywood, but the rot certainly does. The rot has made it past the plywood and into the wall system. You're looking at 38% of the areas that were opened have that rot. So what does this all mean? Our conclusions is, as I mentioned, there is a lifespan to the natural products, your natural siding that you have on your buildings. That lifespan is 20 to 30 years. You are at that point. Even the youngest of the communities, the youngest of the villages, is at 20 years. There may be varying stages of deterioration, but you are at the end of the life cycle. And when you're at the end of the life cycle, these things start to break down. And when they break down, they allow more water into the wall system. So what do we need to do? We need to manage that water. But if we don't have the proper installation of the WRB, if we're missing flashing details, we can't manage that water, and it's going to cause more severe damage over time. As I mentioned, the exterior sheathing is in various stages of rot and deterioration, where it's requiring replacement. Windows and patio doors, I mentioned this, that they're at the end of their serviceable life, so there are a number of them that I've seen that have actually failed that will need replacement. And then the structural framing of the decks. While the structural frame of the deck, the bones of the decks appears to be okay, we really need to address the lack of flashing details and how they're actually connected back to the buildings. So our recommendations, as I mentioned, we came to the same conclusion as GRLA in that what is required here is full replacement of your envelope for the reasons stated. Your siding is at the end of its service life, but more importantly, that water management system, the products that are installed to keep your buildings dry and protected are installed poorly, are missing, and for that reason alone, you need to look at a full replacement at this point. So what are some of the advantages of full replacement? Well, you get comprehensive repairs. So you're addressing all the issues. You're addressing all the staining, you're addressing all the lack of flashings, you're addressing any windows and doors that have failed. You're afforded the opportunity to inspect all areas. So if you're just doing an elevation, you don't know if the next elevation has problems, which it most likely does. But you're only addressing it in the targeted approach. When you do full replacement, you're taking care of all of the issues. It affords you the opportunity to properly install that WRB and those associated flashings that I told you about. So it manages the water away. So if it's done properly, your buildings are dry for the next 30, 40 years. Windows and doors, they can be properly flashed. Right now, the rough opening that we had talked about at the beginning, the rough openings are not properly flashed. Now, back during original construction, it was not actually required by code to flash those rough openings. Industry best standards and practices, yes, but not a requirement. So back in the day, the thinking was install the window, we'll tape around the perimeter, and that'll keep the water out, which is true. But what happens when the window fails? When the window fails, where's the water going to go? You just trapped it because you just taped over all the seams on it. So the reason why the industry has changed its mind, now code requires you have to flash those rough openings. You have to leave the bottom open so that when the the bottom flange of the window open so that when the window actually does fail, water is being drained out onto the surface of the WRB and away from the building. So it provides you the opportunity to do that as well. You end up getting the most comprehensive warranties from the contractor. Effective long-term cost due to reduced maintenance, depending on the products and the materials that you use. And we are currently in the process of trying to figure that out with the board. We're in the process of developing what that repair strategy is and what type of materials we're going to use. And then overall, it maintains the value of the units and the community as a whole, rather than doing it piecemeal over 20 years. Some of the questions, we did receive some of the questions, and I appreciate the community taking the time to send those in. I have a couple here that I'll address. Who will be overseeing the quality control of the products used, as well as each step of the construction? So that is the responsibility of your third-party engineering firm. So if it's BES, we act as your designers of record, and we will be on site to ensure quality control, and that happens on a weekly basis. So we actually attend weekly construction meetings. We will be on site multiple times during the week to ensure that the installation is being done per the repair specifications, industry best standards and practices, code, and the manufacturer's warranty and installation requirements. And we'll actually coordinate product technical the manufacturer's technical reps to actually come out on a monthly basis and actually do their review as well. So you'll have an additional set of eyes that actually come out and ensure that quality for you. Next question was buildings partially sided to be totally finished. Repairs in 2018-19, completed full building envelope. Does this mean the work already completed? In other words, are we throwing out what we did over 2018-2019? The answer is no. We're still in the process of developing that repair design, as I just mentioned, but we're going to provide a technical review of what has been done to the board, with the pros and cons for leaving it in place or removing it. And then they'll make a decision based upon that. Poor construction techniques during the original development. What are the specific construction techniques that we are referring to? Simple. We just reviewed that. Installation of the weather resistant barrier, the water management system, poorly done. Areas missing flashing details. Those are the things that we're talking about. Who's responsible for the repairs if the damage is done during the construction? This is actually a great question. So typically, as a requirement on our projects, we require the contractor to perform a pre-construction survey of not only the exterior of the building, but the interior of the building as well. So they'll come in and they'll do video and photographic documentation of existing conditions. If for whatever reason there is damage sustained to any personal items during the construction process, we'll do a review. In most cases, whoever has caused the damage takes ownership to that. If for whatever reason there is a dispute, BES would act as the mediator in that process. And then there was one more question I had from somebody in the room, which was, how can we maintain quality if the contractor's crews are switched out during the process? And while we can't manage the contractor's own crews, one of the things that we require is that if a crew is going to be swapped out on site, if we're 6 months into the process and the contractor decides to move them to another project and bring in another crew, They have to notify us ahead of time. They have to let us know why it's happening. They have to let us know who the crew is that's coming in. And then what we do is we ensure that when that crew does come in, that they are familiarized with the details specific to your project, to each site, because each site is different. So there is an expectation that those crews will be trained by the contractor's management, and there will be additional oversight by BES, us, to ensure that they're installing everything properly. That's all I have, folks. That's the end of my presentation. I appreciate your time. I know that there's going to be plenty of opportunity for additional questions. We will make ourselves available. We are trying to be as transparent as possible, so ask questions. We strongly encourage, we told Kevin, we strongly encourage the community to ask questions. We want you guys to be as informed as you possibly can during this process. The board has already been through this. This is your first opportunity to understand the challenges that are going on, and we're going to throw a lot of information at you. You're going to take a little while to marinate, and there'll be some questions that will come up, and we'll be happy to answer those. At this point, I'd like to introduce you guys to Eric Churchill. He is the president of Schoenecker Property Services, who is a specialty contractor that deals specifically with condo restorations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. As Mike said, my name's Eric Churchill from Schoenecker Property Services, known in the market as SPS. And I'm going to start by acknowledging that following Mike is going to be a little repetitive. We're going to cover some things that are similar to what Mike spoke about. What I'd like to ask that you think about the vantage point that we have as a contractor, and the lens that we're looking through is a little different than the lens of an engineer. What we're bringing to the table is 30 years of experience evaluating building envelopes and then actually doing the repair and learning from that process. You can imagine the feedback loop that exists when you do an evaluation. You work with the community to make a plan, and you actually do the work, and you get to see the results of your evaluation, and you get to learn the requirements of solving the problem, some of the problems that we're facing with the building envelope. So that's the lens. We're looking at it through a slightly different lens. SPS is a mission-based company. We're committed to working with communities and collaborating with communities to make great decisions. We work exclusively with condominium communities. That's our whole world, is working with boards, working with homeowners, working with the service professionals that are on your team. And as I said, we use our expertise and the feedback we get from evaluating envelopes and then fixing envelopes. That becomes part of our foundation of knowledge and expertise that we can bring to the table when looking at the different options for solving some of the problems with building envelopes. Our approach to planning a building envelope project is first to get the facts, to have a firm understanding of exactly what's going on, and then to consider all the options. And I'm sure many of you have got lots of options running through your head right now. You saw a lot of stats. You've seen a lot of information on the board. You know, the bookends of the options are replace everything and spot repair as you have problems. That's sort of the bookends. And what we do is work with the board and the community to find the most fiscally, the best fiscally responsible approach to solving the problem and getting long-term performance while spending the least amount of money. Okay, that's kind of what's the background for that. A few vocabulary terms that I just want to cover so that I'm, again, consistent with what Mike said. And as I talk about some of our findings, the vocabulary that you're going to hear from me. So you heard WRB, weather-resistant barrier. You heard WMS, water management system. You'll hear waterproofing membrane, Tyvek. I'm just going to call it waterproofing membrane. So you'll hear me say that word. That is the membrane that sits in the wall assembly that protects the wood from getting wet. Flashing. Flashing connects all the waterproofing membrane. You got big, wide sheets of waterproofing membrane. The flashing details are at all the transitions. So they're like the piece of tape. If you're wrapping a present, you've got a transition. You want to make it look nice. You put a nice piece of tape. That is what keeps everything straight and looking nice and neat and keeps the present tight. Same with this, except it's got to be waterproof. So imagine wrapping a present and all the seams have waterproof tape on them. You've heard about reverse laps. Reverse laps are really important to understand because that's one of the things that allows water to get into the wall cavity. So I like to think of a reverse lap would be very similar to going out in a driving rainstorm, some of the rains we've had recently, putting on a raincoat, walking outside, and tucking that raincoat into your pants. Where's the water going? Okay, it's going in, not shedding out. So a raincoat's designed to layer over your pants, let the water run off. If you took the raincoat, tucked it in, you'd funnel the water into your pants. A reverse lap funnels water into the building. Condominium versus freestanding home. Why do we have these problems? Many people say, well, Eric, I lived in a home for 40 years. Everything was fine. I didn't have these issues with my freestanding home. Think of a freestanding home as a square box with often 4 corners, maybe 6 because you've got an addition, a roof that neatly meets the sidewalls, maybe a dormer or 2. Think about how many seams there are. Now imagine your condominium home. Condominium homes are built so they're not a whole bunch of square boxes stacked next to each other, but what the architects did was they staggered the homes. They elevated walls. They added dormers. They created additions so that each home looked as its own home while attached to a building. That creates hundreds of seams. And the seams are the vulnerable spots. So the reason condominiums perform differently than homes is it's significantly more difficult to waterproof condominium architecture than home architecture. Okay, a couple more. Wall assembly. As Mike talked a lot about the walls, you've got the shingles on the outside. Next, underneath the shingles, you've got the waterproofing membrane. Next, you have plywood or sheathing. I'm going to call it plywood. Next, you have framing. Those are the 2x4 studs in the wall that when you're hanging a picture on the inside of your home, you're trying to hit the 2x4 stud so the nail holds and the picture doesn't fall. In between the 2x4 studs is insulation, and the next thing behind the insulation, behind the 2x4 studs, is the back of your living room wall. That's your sheetrock that represents the inside of your home. So siding, in this case shingles, water membrane, plywood, studs and insulation, sheetrock. Okay, that's your wall assembly. That's what we're concerned about keeping water out of. All right, that's vocabulary. You're going to hear me say those some number of those things as we go. I'm going to give you an overview of our process. I'm going to share with you our findings, and I'm going to answer some of the questions that were shared prior to the meeting today. Again, a little repetitive here. Our process: get the facts, consider the options, create an action plan. Very much in line with your board. When we were hired, your board came to us and we had an initial meeting we called a kickoff meeting, and our first question to your board is, what are your goals? What do you want out of the process of working with SPS? These are the goals they shared with us. I won't read through each of them, but they're here as part of the presentation. So you can see the thought that went into this process from day one, what the board was looking to learn. In addition to the board having goals, we have goals. And our goals, again, shared here, the most important is transparency. And the point of today is to share midstream during a process, to share what we know so far and what we know definitively so far. Okay, so there can be anytime you take that risk and you expose and the transparency, you share the process, you'll have a whole bunch of people out there that are saying, whoa, this is too much information, I don't want to know all this stuff. And there's other people out there that will say, there's a whole bunch more information I want to know, tell me now. Okay, it's a risk we take when we're transparent, and one I hope that you appreciate. Your board is working extremely hard to keep the community informed, and today is an example of that. Okay, so building envelope. One of the questions that came up was, how do you know that the whole system has failed? How do you know that just because you find failure in one location, that there's failure everywhere? You don't, okay? But it's important to understand that the building envelope is a system, and one failure in one part of one system, that system has failed. Your car, okay, if your car battery fails, you can't drive your car. The whole car's fine, can't drive your car, okay? Need to fix the car battery. As you go through and you think about all the different things that could fail from the car battery all the way through the entire system, okay, if you have broken little parts and pieces all through all the different parts and pieces that make the car work, okay, at some point you look and you just say, this isn't about replacing the battery, this is about replacing the car, okay? When we look at a building envelope system, we think about the whole system, and you think about, yes, individual parts and pieces can break, but more importantly, what does that mean for the overall performance of the entire system? You can see the parts and pieces here on the board. So I talked before about waterproof membrane, which would be underlying the entire siding system here, and I talked about flashing details. All the circles represent where there are flashing details. The flashing details are where the envelope system fails. Those are the problem areas. So naturally, when we're investigating, we look not for problems, but we look where we have experience that these are the problem areas. These are the kinds of things you want to look at. So did we open up the middle of a wall? No. What we opened up was transition points, and then we looked at other areas. You'll see a couple photos where we identified source and symptom that were spread far apart, and you can make a logical conclusion that if there's water getting in up here and that same water's coming in out down here, that there's water in between without opening that up. Again, for the purpose of today, we are in phase one of this process. We are just getting the facts. We're sharing facts with you today. We are not getting into what are all the options of how to solve this problem. Okay? Mike presented recommendations. That's different from what we've done so far. What we've done so far is simply collect the facts, and we are at the front end of exploring options with the board. But those options have not been well vetted, and the decisions as to exactly what to do have not been made. Mike alluded to this, and I want to emphasize this point. What's a leak? While I'm speaking on this slide, just take a minute to read through these five points. Hopefully 1 through 4 are familiar to you. These are things that you would be used to describing as a leak. It might cause you to call Megan or Mike and say, hey, I've got a spot on my ceiling. Hey, I've got a musty smell in my home. Okay, I've got water dripping in through a window or through a skylight or through a light switch. When we think of leaks, we think of the leaks that you don't see. We think of the leak getting into the wall system that I described before it gets to you. Before a leak can create a stain on a ceiling or a wall, it has to have gotten into the wall. Oftentimes, it's in the wall for a long period of time before you see it. Identifying those leaks is part of really what I would call advanced building envelope analysis, because it's identifying those leaks early that allow you to resolve the issue, resolve the source of the leak, prevent the ongoing deterioration that comes from water in the wall cavity, and reduce the long-term cost of the problem. Okay, so I'm going to share with you pictures of what we did during our analysis, our exploratory analysis, where we what we spent our time was opening up the wall system and looking at what we saw. Okay, so what you see here is those blue arrows indicate reverse laps. We all now know what a reverse lap is. They're everywhere. The impact of the reverse lap, you saw the video on the far right. You've got water getting in behind the wall cavity, behind the waterproof membrane. It's trapped behind the membrane, and it's causing rot to the plywood. This location here is where is a typical transition where a roof hits a wall. One of the ways to prevent water from causing a problem where the roof hits the wall and you have an inside corner created in the architecture, one of the ways to your suspenders, so to speak, is to have a good waterproof membrane. So any water that gets in there is shed to the outside. The better solution is don't let the water get there to begin with. A simple flashing detail called kick-out flashing prevents water from running down that inside corner and puts the water properly into the gutter. So this is a flashing detail that would have been valuable in that case. Okay, two more pictures of water getting into the wall cavity, in this case adjacent to a window. It's really important to understand that a window has two very distinct parts. The sash of the window, which is the part you use. That's the part that opens and closes, holds the window that you see through. It's what you probably call your window. To us, the window is actually in the right picture. The frame of the window is the part of the window that connects the window to the wall system, to the flashing system, and to the envelope system. That part, the detail that connects the window to the envelope system, we think of as the window frame. That window frame can fail before the window fails. So the window can be working fine. The window frame can fail, allowing water to get into the wall cavity. Mike's tests that he did were testing on the window itself to make sure the functionality of the window was working. Okay? What we want to do is, when we look at pictures like this, we want to ask ourselves, how is water getting in behind the window? And the concern here is that the frame of the window has failed, and the flashing detail that integrates the frame to the building envelope system has also failed, one of the two or both, allowing water to get into that location. On the left, you just see simple technology, moisture meter. We took moisture readings throughout the property. If you look carefully and you see the 3 dashed lines, that's because it's so wet, it's off the charts wet. So it's at that point saturated with water. Again, more details of what happens when water gets into the wall cavity. It's kind of deterioration you see. Here's a reverse lap where the flashing detail is such that any water getting in around that window, at the window frame to envelope system connection point, is getting trapped behind the waterproof membrane and causing rot. So going back to the flashing detail, I'm sharing with you a few details about flashing systems. These are remedy type things just from an educational perspective. We looked at kick-out flashing. This is window flashing. What you're looking at here is, on the far left, is the rough opening. That's the construction that you would see before the window was put in, before any plywood was applied to the wall. You'd see those 2x4 studs. That creates the opening for the window. The middle photo, you see the flashing detail that protects that wood. That's an adhered membrane detail that's stuck to the wood and goes into the home along the sides of that wood frame. And it's also at the base. And then on the right, you see after the window's been put in, you see the flashing detail that interfaces the flashing to the building envelope system. Okay, this is true belt and suspenders. You've put a flashing detail behind the window in case water were to get in. You've installed the window. You've put a flashing detail over the window to prevent water from getting in. This is what it would look like in the field. So imagine just, we didn't take any broad pictures of entire installed windows on the property, but imagine just extrapolate from some of the pictures you saw of the deterioration around the window. It didn't look like this when it was originally constructed. Okay, this is designed to keep water out. Your original construction had gaps in this system everywhere, so water is getting in. So this is before. Remember when I spoke in my opening comments about the way we approach the analysis? Here you have a source on your left photo here, water getting in at the top, typical spot at a roof-to-wall transition on a chimney box. You can see the staining down the inside corner. A lot of people would look at that and say, well, that's just the water running down the shingles on the outside. That's what the shingles are designed to do. Of course, they're going to stain. There's water running down. The water is going to stain the shingles. Pop open the shingles and see if there's water underneath. There is. So it's not just water running down the shingles. It's actually water running behind the shingles. And in the waterproof membrane, you can see 40% moisture. Just to give you an idea, 12% is normal. Once you hit 17%, you get what we call the terrarium effect. It will never dry out. Past 17, done. It's wet until you go in and do something to fix it. So when you get up into these high numbers, you need to get in here and fix not only the source of the problem, but you need to remove the water that's already in there. Okay, this is a slider. You can just see on the left there, the inconsistency with the attachment of the slider, or the integration of the slider to the building envelope system, and the resulting water penetration and the resulting rot. This is a new repair, and this is something we want to call attention to, which is, repairs are hard to manage. You got them going on. If you got them going on all over the place, it's hard to manage quality on repairs. The quality on this repair is not good. There's shingles stuffed in there. There's the sheathing wasn't replaced. There's an exposed wire. So that's just to give you an idea of the way we went about this. We didn't just go look for all the stuff that was old and broken. We went to actually something that was repaired within the last couple of years, and we just wanted to open up that to see what that looked like. And this is that's what we found. So here's an area where you'd look at and you'd say, okay, this is old and broken. Weathered shingles, pretty clearly at the end of their useful life or beyond. We opened it up and found inconsistent flashing details in terms of with the best practices, and water getting in behind the Tyvek, the waterproofing membrane, causing additional rot to the siding. So this is a kind of an obvious one. So we want to check those as well and see what's going on. This is just another one that's not so obvious, just the end of a garage with clapboard versus shingle. In this case, standing up on the ladder that was put up on that wall and leaning on that wall, that whole wall actually will move. And then you can see why the plywood, which in this case is the oriented strand board, it's just the kind of plywood it is fully deteriorated and no longer structurally sound. Again, so how much of this is there? We don't know, but you just open a spot and you find, plywood that's gapped, inconsistency with the weatherization system, the weatherproof membrane, multiple kinds of membrane being used, and resulting water penetration and deterioration to the sheathing. More of the same. Okay, that's oriented strand board. Mike referred to that. When it deteriorates, it turns to mulch. You can see that's what he's talking about. This is the area where Mike was talking about the flashing detail at the deck, allowing water to get into the wall cavity, causing damage to the slider that's the slider frame and the slider interface that's underneath the deck. This is everywhere. This is a very common throughout the property. Okay, this is the bottom of a chimney box. Again, water that has gotten in through the chimney. You can see this water didn't come just right in here from the outside. This is a protected area. This water came from above, worked its way down through the wall cavity, ended up rotting the framing at the bottom of the chimney. Again, more of the same, reverse lapping, multiple different, obviously a repair here at some point, different waterproof membranes, Tyvek, tar paper, sheathing rot, framing rot. This is, again, oriented strand board that's rotting, insulation, and those last pieces, that's pulling apart a 2x4 stud. So that stud is rotten to the point where it's deteriorating, where you can just, with your hands, pull it apart. So we also did some work at Kingsway Trust on your bigger building, on the common buildings. And I just this is very preliminary, but I wanted to share with you that we, as Kevin suggested, we are keeping these two processes in parallel with one another because they are related timelines and they're related impacts, they're related financial implications. So we've done phase one with the Kingsway Trust buildings, just sharing. I just wanted everybody to be aware, similar problems on these on the larger buildings. We're not at we're sort of one step behind with Kingsway Trust, and we'll be catching up over the next month, where we'll be talking about options for addressing those buildings. But consistency here across the homes and the larger buildings in terms of the construction defects that you see, or the construction inconsistencies, the reverse lapping, the products being used. There's a lot of similarity, and the similarity of when water gets into the wood frame, whether it's in this case the plywood, combined with the framing is rotten. So what in summary? I'll leave you to read these for yourself, but in summary, the shingles have reached the end of their useful life. Yes, you can find some shingles that are still in good condition. That you can do that, but that window that you're in is the shingles are at the end of their useful life, and they need to be addressed. The flashing details were put in incorrectly throughout the property. It's not isolated. It's systemic through the property. It needs to be addressed. The cost of this repair is simply increasing with time, the same way the cost of fixing a rust spot, for those of you who had cars back in the day that cars rusted. That was when I got my first car. My dad said Rust-Oleum, Rust-Oleum, Rust-Oleum. I made sure I had the undercarriage treatment, everything like that. Why? Because rust becomes bigger rust, becomes structural damage to the car, and eventually is a problem. Same thing. Okay? This problem is growing in the buildings. Anywhere where there's water, it's getting worse tomorrow. Sheathing and framing has already gotten to the point where it's been wet over time, it's deteriorating. Where it's just stained now, it's pre-deteriorating. Great, better to catch it now so it doesn't have to be replaced. The longer you wait, the more sheathing you replace, the more framing you replace. You can imagine those are the expensive parts of a project like this. Those are the intricate surgical details, the structural integrity of the home. Deck-to-wall transitions, consistent with what BES found. Those transitions need to be evaluated throughout the entire property, but all transitions that we inspected are flashed incorrectly. Windows, sliders, and doors, the flashing details there, the rough opening flashing is not done correctly, and it's just a matter of time as the windows age, those rough openings will become a larger problem. So I thought about jumping ahead and showing you this slide at the beginning so you could have in your head the image of what a properly flashed building would look like. And then you could think about, when you saw all those pictures, is ours done right? I think it's pretty easy for us to draw the conclusion, looking at this and thinking about what we just saw. The building was not, the underlayment system, the weatherization system, the flashing details were not done properly. This is what it should look like before the siding goes up. A absolutely one uniform film with proper tape, proper sealing, proper flashing details at all the transitions. So some of the questions. I've bundled the questions together, and I'm going to put them up on the screen and let you read those, but I'm just going to answer them from my sheet here. There was a question about life expectancy of white cedar sidewall shingles. 20 to 30 years is the right number. So you're right in that window of at the end of their useful life. Quantity of flashing failure. So someone said, is it everywhere? Yes, it's everywhere. Did we open up everywhere? No. Is it cost effective or prudent to open up everywhere? At some point, you want to put money into fixing the problem versus proving the problem. Okay? We know the problem is there. That's a brutal fact that the board has had to confront. It was as hard for them to confront as it will be for the entire community, but that's the case. The flashing has failed, mostly because it wasn't installed properly. Minimizing the construction impact. So during a large-scale construction project, what's the impact on me, the homeowner, not me, a contractor, but me, the homeowner. And the impact on a very high level, yes, you can stay in your home. On a also high level, yes, it's inconvenient. There'll be noise while your home's being worked on. You will be inconvenienced in that there'll be some things you need to do in terms of preparing your home for construction. It's not as bad as preparing for hardwood floor refinishing. You don't have to move all your furniture out, but you do probably take some pictures off the walls, take furniture off your deck, things like that. So there is the expectation is you can stay in the home, you will be safe, you will be able to come and go, but there will be an impact to your daily life while your home is being worked on, all of which is covered in very elaborate pre-construction planning process and communication with the homeowners, all of which is something that SPS does, BES would require as an oversight firm. So you're in very good hands with respect to the impact, but it's not nothing. Order of production. Does it make sense to produce this project in the same order that it was built? Older homes first to newer homes. Maybe. Does it make sense to produce it starting in one geographic location and work way through? Maybe. Does it make sense to start at both ends and work to the middle? Maybe. What's important to understand is all that gets thought about and a good plan gets put in place, and then that plan is shared with the community so everybody knows what to expect. Timing, and this is an interesting question. Let me get to the next page. Timing. I kind of took this question two ways. One is should you do it all now or should you wait? How should you approach it? So my answer to the timing question is, I'm going to go back to where I started and say the bookends on timing are do it all at once. The other bookend is spot repair until you get to the last day of the building envelope's life, and then do it all. Spot repair is not equal sort of solution to do it all now, and spot repair, it's spot repair, do it all at some point in the future. Those are your bookends. One is do it now, one is delay and do it later, and then there's a whole bunch in between. Do the project over 2 years, do the project over 5 years, do the project over 10 years, do it in the order that it was originally produced. All of that is part of the considering the options phase of this process, and that's the phase that the board is in right now. So all of that's being discussed. Deck and window options, and what was asked here was, again, I'm not necessarily keeping exact pace here, but all these questions will be answered. There's a few more. So deck and window options. Do I, as a homeowner, have the option to have my deck that I own replaced during this process? Absolutely. Do I have the option to have my windows or sliders, which I own, replaced during this process? Absolutely. Those are things that you would expect one-on-one meetings with contractor prior to the project starting to lay out those options in detail. Cost, timing, implication, all of the above. What's your flexibility? Can you make your deck bigger? Could you make it smaller? Could you make one window into 2 windows? All of those things are board level decisions that would get passed down, and then there would be a meeting between contractor and homeowner for every single homeowner. All 456 homeowners will have the option of what to do about your windows that you own, what to do about your deck that you own, in conjunction with whatever is done to the building envelope. How widespread is the failure? The envelope's leaking. Is it leaking from everywhere? No. Every single spot on every single building is not leaking. It's leaking from enough places where the impact is the water's in the wall. So if you have a pool and you poke one hole in the side of a kiddie pool, up-ground pool, you poke one hole in the side, the pool's leaking, it's just a matter of time. It's going out of water with 1 hole, 5 holes, 20 holes, a big slash in the side. So the envelope has failed. It's beyond patching the little hole in the pool. You need a more holistic solution. What kind of products will be used? This is my last question. What kind of products will be used? Will there be some sort of upgrade? If this is being done in a holistic way, can we take advantage of this and upgrade the products and upgrade the architectural appearance to maybe more of a current look? The answer is absolutely. One of the specific questions was, for example, could we have white trim? Absolutely, you can have white trim. Could we vary the current location of clapboard siding and shingle siding to make it consistent with Cape architecture? Yes, that's an option. Could we make it all clapboard? Could we make it all shingle? Yes, those are all options. The goal would be to preserve the architectural integrity of the way the community is now, and to maybe give it a facelift of, maybe bring it from 1990 to when it was built in the 80s, 90s to 2020. And there's some things some architectural decisions that could be made that would be consistent with that. So that is what I have to share. Thank you for taking the time. This is an extraordinary opportunity I think you have as a community to benefit from the hard work of a really, really talented board. They're putting a lot of time into this. This meeting is the result of the care that is going into this challenge that the community faces, and it's a privilege to be part of it. So thank you for including SPS. Kevin, am I turning it back over to you? I know there's a few more questions that are going to get answered. So Andy Hughes from Barkin is going to answer a few more of the questions that were addressed to Barkin.
Good afternoon again. Thank you for all the owners that did submit questions. This was very helpful to us. And I think we've covered a lot. And as discussed previously, we're going to be sending out a more comprehensive response to all the questions. Great. So first question we're going to address is when we all bought our homes at Kings Way, we bought into the communal living and shared costs to maintain the property. When many of us bought our homes, it was with the understanding we agreed to pay our monthly HOA fee, but that in return we would have an adequate property maintenance, professional landscaping, and access to all of our common areas. In many of our circumstances, owners who may have attended the homeowners' semi-annual meetings did not communicate to prospective buyers the concerns about the elephant in the tent. And so we're in the dark about what they were actually buying into. This information that the board has kind of transmitted to the community over the last few years has always been available and public and posted. It is the responsibility of the buyer and their agent to research and complete the proper due diligence before buying into a condo community. The information that was included in these postings is included in the monthly minutes, the monthly crier, and annual meeting documents and presentations. And these are all documents that Barkin Management is routinely asked for owners who are looking to refinance or sell their units. Next question. None of us wants to leave Kingsway, but many of us are concluding from what we know so far, this may be our only option. In these uncertain economic times, taking out a loan on a fixed income is risky and not fiscally responsible. We continue to need to finance upgrades, repairs, and improvements to maintain the integrity of interior, courtyards, and decks of our own individual units. When will the information addressing this concern be forthcoming? For those who are forced to sell when the figures come out, how will this affect the price and our ability to sell in the immediate future? First, we don't anticipate anyone being forced to sell. We hope that's not the case. Every situation is obviously different, and there's many ways to look at this question and answer, but ultimately, how I like to look at it is this is a very large upgrade to your community and your building. It's a huge investment in the overall community as well as a substantial investment to the exterior of each and every one of your homes. There will be a noticeable difference, and once completed, buyers who may be currently put off by some of the exteriors that they've seen, you've seen pictures today, they're going to have a whole new product to view. We also plan to offer multiple options to owners for whatever the cost will be. All financial situations are being considered when these decisions are made, and exploring funding for this project in a long-term financing option that will be offered as well. Another question after the crier was on the section about leaks occurring in your home, and you're responsible for paying for the I believe, interior damages. This seems odd. If it is a failure of the system the Kingsway Condo Trust is responsible for maintaining, and we understood our HOA fees would cover that. Sorry. Second page. Maybe I didn't bring that one up. This is a common question in condominium living, and often an unpopular answer, and some find unfair. The association is responsible for repairing the cause of these leaks, if it's a common area element, a roof, siding, but any interior damage does belong to the unit owners. This does lean towards an insurance-related question, and if you're unsure, talk to your insurance agent and they can guide you in the right direction on this topic. Hopefully they'll also make sure that you have the appropriate coverages for your home and your belongings. Also regarding the frequently asked questions on the crier, beneficial interest supplement. Is this the same as supplemental assessment? Is the assessment different for units depending on the size? I kind of looked at this as two different questions, one focusing on how beneficial interest is calculated for each owner, and the other how this portion of a project will be divided by unit owners. The first question on beneficial interest, square foot does usually play into it. Every developer, during construction or after construction, determines what beneficial interest each condominium unit has. Usually it's based on size, and the higher the sale price of the unit, generally the higher the beneficial interest. The second part of this question, yes, any portion of each unit owner's cost to this project will be based on their beneficial interest. So the higher beneficial interest you'll have, a higher portion you'll have. Assessment concerns. I'm anxious to know about the financing option. I would really like to encourage this, especially for those on a budget. I'm especially concerned about those who have been at Kingsway for a long time, who may not have the money available. Obviously, the assessment will be paid in full if they were to sell. Home appreciation will surely help here. but I would feel really bad if long-termers are forced out. So I encourage the best financing plan that can be put together to help those who do not have the money readily available to pay their assessment. Will this be possible? Short answer here is yes, definitely. The board has been very careful, and when we do have all the numbers together, we certainly will be looking into all financing options. And for those that will feel a larger impact, spreading this over a long term with a smaller monthly payment is the goal. Also on the frequently asked questions, page 3, we run the risk of losing property value and becoming less attractive to the market. Enhance the marketability of our homes in Kingsway for today. Has the thought been given to how adding a significant supplemental assessment will impact the marketability of our homes? I partly answered this already, and what I had mentioned was this is a huge investment in your community. You have to think of it that way. You're also upgrading the exterior of your home, and there will be a noticeable difference. There is tangible value in what you're doing here, and it should help with the value of your home. Even with a supplemental assessment, we don't anticipate Kingsway fees to be higher than what average is for this market. There's market surveys that have been done, SPS has done studies, and other communities that are very similar to Kingsway within a 50-mile radius, the average fees would be right in line with what Kingsway would be looking at after such an undertaking. Why is it necessary for the current residents to absorb upfront in a one-time assessment rather than over time on an as-needed basis? The total cost of a major project is that primarily for the benefit of the future residents, especially when there is no evidence of any problem in many homes at this time. Why isn't a long-range plan done in phases or as an as-needed basis? Using local Cape Cod companies. Is that feasible? Costs may go up, but future residents will buy in with a relatively higher Social Security, pension, and investment base compared to those of us who have been retired for decades already. They will be positioned for higher costs of living and reasonable and timely assessments. When you think of the average condo buyer, you probably think of someone who buys in, I'm going to be here 7, 10, possibly 15 years. Some more, some less. Keeping condo fees down is something we all know is attractive to most owners, and boards tend to like to do that. But when you think of 456 units and the phased approach that's discussed here, it really doesn't make a lot of sense in that the idea of taking on all of it at once does, because there's a lot of people that won't experience that benefit. You'll have residents that could end up paying for 10 other buildings upgrades before they even reach yours. So you could basically have someone paying for years of the phased repairs and not ever realize the benefit of it before they sell your unit. With this all-in approach that we're discussing, possibly a 3-year project, your condo fees have stayed low long enough, and now everyone pays in at one time and everyone gets the immediate benefit. Not to mention how much more expensive the phased approach would be and how much more deterioration occurs every year. The next section will be questions. If I could just leave everyone with one final thought, I would just like to reiterate a fact that I believe each presenter has already pointed out. You're not alone in this. This is pervasive throughout the condo industry. As Bill Deschino mentioned, just about all of our clients experience something like this. All building components have useful lifespans, and they all experience failure over time. It's easy to look back and point fingers and talk about how we got here, and we hear these concerns and questions with all of our clients. The developer didn't do it right, past boards didn't save enough, how did we not see this coming? You can discuss these questions ad nauseum, really get nowhere. But the bottom line is no codes were broken, no construction methods used were considered unacceptable by building inspectors, and everything was approved and passed. Years later, boards have a fiduciary duty to maintain the life of your assessment or the value of your investment. Short of having X-ray vision, you don't know what's going on behind your shingles. An irresponsible board or an ill-advised board may delay or put off facing such a problem until it's too late. That's when leaks, black growth, and structural deterioration are prevalent. These are when you actually see it on the interior of your homes. Such a project at that point is exponentially more expensive and significantly decreases the value of your homes. But luckily, you've had boards over the last few years doing what they're supposed to be doing. These boards, most notably your current board, are thinking ahead and avoiding that unsurmountable eventual result of inaction or even a very phased approach. They're getting the professionals in the field, they've gathered second and third opinions, and they're doing the due diligence to make the best informed decision and the most financially responsible decision. Thank you very much. Betsy would like to come up and answer some Kingsway Condo Trust questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. One of the questions that came to us was about the operating budget and the fact that 18% of your monthly fee goes into reserves for capital expenses and 82% of it is in your operating budget. So I was asked to just go through this quickly with you so you understand how we put this budget together. The very first thing you have to remember is everything here is in thousands. So when you see 970, it's not $970, it's $970,000, okay? So if we look at the very top, under utilities and operations, I've listed all of the different pieces of the budget that would fall into that category. And that's about 36% of your total budget, your monthly fee. The second one is personnel, and I apologize if I make a mistake because I don't have my glasses on. Personnel, and that's your management, that's your office management and your grounds fee people, their benefits and employee taxes. The next column is taxes and insurance. Now, when you see the word taxes, don't panic. We're a condominium association. We pay taxes on the interest that's earned on our money, not on the amount of money that you've paid in, okay? So that's a significant difference. So taxes and insurance, and that property insurance, as you all know from last year when we had our meeting, that property insurance went sky high, and that was a huge increase. So, and that total amount, $260,000. It's 10% of our whole budget. And the final one is administration. I think it's also important to recognize, just like when a town or a state or even the federal government is doing a budget, there are contractual fees that have to be taken into account that you can't change. That's our trash removal, our landscaping contract. There are some pieces of the landscaping that are separate from the contract, and we put those into our reserves, but in general, there are many contractual responsibilities that we have, and there's not a lot in our budget that we have leeway with. Office supplies, that's one example, but it's such a small amount of money, it's really not worth pointing that out. Okay, so we look at the total amount of the operating budget for Kingsway Condo Trust, $660,000. Is that what it says? No, $1,660,000. Sorry. That's about 62% of your total monthly fee. Looking at the Kingsway Trust operating expenses, and they are set up just the same way as the condo trust. 3 categories. The CAM, that's the common area. That's your post office, the meeting house, the social room, the green, the village green, the road, the sidewalks going around the road, those walking paths. $433,000, 16% of your budget. That's a lot. The wastewater treatment facility, again, that's contractual. That's 11%. And then the open space golf course, that's 11%, for a total of $1,808,000. Putting those all together, it's 82% of your monthly fee. That other $558,000 is your reserve contribution, or 18%. Okay? You're going to get this by email tomorrow. So if you have any questions, you can always contact me and I'll help you walk through it. But that's the answer to that question. Kevin?
Okay, we're almost done. So, in terms of continuing along with the answering the questions, so we had one question regarding cost reduction that we started working on last year, and what were the opportunities that we could do to bring our costs down. And we worked with actually property management led us in terms of finding ways that we could lower our cost. And the whole idea is that if you can reduce your cost and then reinvest it back into the community, that's better than adding more fees to the homeowners. And so I think we had a pretty successful program. I think we mentioned in the Crier supplement that we saved $300,000. I mean, some of this is arguable in terms of is it one time or is it ongoing. Also, I'd like to caution you, some of this is capital, some of this is expense, but there's a $311,000 or $300,000 laid out for you. Property management looked at different ways of doing the fencing in the way that we've done it in the past. They also looked at longevity and how can we increase the life of the fences and that sort of thing. Did a great job. There's a 24% cost reduction over the way we used to do it. Another example is gates. We had an 18% reduction on gates. The pricing there is all there for you to review. And we're more than happy to sit down with anybody that would like to go over this. In terms of our current landscaper, over the previous landscaper, we saved $75,000 a year by bidding it out. So that's some examples of the cost reduction. Now the question is okay, well that's great. So what did I get for the cost reduction? Because you said you were reinvesting it back into the community. Well, we got surprised with a huge insurance bill, and as I've mentioned in the prior criers, we were covered. 70% of our property was covered. In other words, our property is valued at $150 million, and we are covered to $100 million. And for those of us that have owned houses in the past, I'm sure you've always had replacement cost on, well, at least I would hope you'd have replacement cost on your house. Okay, it's the same situation here. So that was $100,000 alone. But you can rest assured that the property is properly covered now and is consistent with the legal requirements that our board has in terms of maintaining full property insurance coverage. Another example is ice remediation, or when it gets slippery out and there's a lot of ice out there. We were advised that in addition to it being good practice from a liability standpoint to go and to clean the sidewalks and that sort of thing and not put ice melt on it is not a very good decision. So we added that. We added other things such as the pruning program that we currently got that we're currently doing. You know, quite frankly, if we had been properly pruning our landscape, you know, over the past 20 or 30 years, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in now. And for those of you, and you know, we also got to remember that if you look at throughout the property, you may not have a backyard. Like for example, you know, I back up to the golf course, but there's some of my fellow residents across the street. They back up to woods, and you know, even though I may not benefit from it, you know, I want them to have their woods properly pruned and cleaned, and that sort of thing. So we added that. Another example is we had an extensive amount of overgrown trees, large trees. We did 60 days of large tree work. And I had, for those of you in Florida, you're probably not aware of it, but we had some tree crews come in and trim the front of the villages. And hopefully in the wintertime this year, we can trim the back. And the reason why we do it in the wintertime is because there's some sort of bugs in the trees, and they're dormant during the winter. If we were to do it in the summertime, it would be disruptive to, you know, our residents. But in addition to that, these bugs transfer from tree to tree, and we don't want that happening. Another example is we had a irrigation system that wasn't properly cared for. And as a result of that, we were using 50% more water than we should. And in addition to that, we had a lot of sprinklers sprinkling the road. Another example is we had sprinkler systems that were on during the rain. And I'm not going to say that it's fully fixed, but I think it's fixed. But what sense does that make? So it's those types of things that what we're trying to do is, before it's too late, is to save this infrastructure so we don't have additional major costs in the future. And then the last item is, I think we've had a very, very aggressive gate and replacement program. I know it's not fast enough for most people because, again, that's another example of infrastructure that's been allowed to go by the wayside. But our property management team has not only changed the material to last 20 or 30 years, maybe it's more than 30 years, I don't know, but it's composite material now. And we've replaced the rotten. In addition to that, we've been able to replace more fencing than we originally estimated because we were able to reduce the cost of the current fence. So those are some examples of what we've got. We got more, but in general, that's what we did with it. Secondly, in terms of why is it necessary to keep an assessment ballpark figure secret when the amount is the primary factor that will impact the personal lives of most of the residents? Well, now this is the risk that you run by being transparent and giving everybody a heads up way ahead of time, is that you're accused of withholding things. The fact is that we let our residents know way ahead of time that we had an issue. We want everybody to know that so we can try to engage the community so that we can talk about it and figure out what we're going to do. And we're in the middle of that, as BES and SPS mentioned today. We're nowhere near the end of it, and we're going to be really pushing to have this thing by the end of September. So in addition to that, as Barbara Murphy has been working on with the Kingsway Trust is going to have some needs too. And they're not in the position of being able to say what the scope of their work is going to be either. So it's not that it's secret. It's a matter that we're thinking it through, we're doing our due diligence, and we're going to be sure of what the proper numbers are before we go and communicate it. And quite frankly, if there's a lot more thought put into things in the past, we wouldn't, we wouldn't be in this situation today. So we're going to think it through, do our due diligence, and then hopefully by the end of September, we'll be able to give you ranges. The only thing that I would ask is, again, we're doing our due diligence. I'm hoping we can get it done by the end of September, but if we can't, we'll let you know, well ahead of schedule. But we're going to do everything that we can to do this. I can tell you this board has worked hundreds of hours to try to sort this out. The second thing, the last question that I have, hopefully, is there was a long-range plan to do the shingles over time on a north, south, east, and west schedule. That's commonly called the elevation schedule. That project got underway. Is the plan scrapped, or will it be rolled into the new plan? And the answer is it'll be rolled into the new plan. Now, what that means, again, we got to sort it out. But we're going to look at the economics. We give you a number, you're going to be able to depend on it. Okay. The other thing too is, and by the way, I just wanted to say, these shingles, bear in mind, and it's on the one of the matrix that I gave you, is we have 1.1 million square feet of siding here, of which 100,000 square feet has been done. So all of the shingling that went on during 2018 and January of 2019, that represents 10% of our total surface within the community. So we got 90% to go. So it's quite a task. I know it sounds overwhelming to most of us, but I really think that we have the right people to help us work through that. And I think you got some great people on the board that have dealt with this in the past and dealt with significant business issues like this. So I really truly believe that we'll be able to get to a good answer. The other thing that I'm very well, actually, I would say all the board is that we know we have 460 or 456 condominium units that we're responsible for. And we need to do our best at making sure that we put together a financial plan that's going to be able to address all 456 units. That's what our goal is. So that's why we're also looking at financing, so that, you know, if you don't want, for some reason, to pay up front, you can pay a monthly fee. I mean, there's some other things that Barkin is working on now that's very innovative. So we got to give that a chance to play out. And again, you know, you'll get more information toward the end of September, and we're going to try to lock this up at the end of the October, hopefully. The other thing is in terms of communication, you'll see some, I still welcome if people want to take a walk. I love to walk. I'll show you around if you want, and you can see what I see and what we see and what we've been dealing with. There's nothing like seeing the facts. And then the second thing is if I have no issues with getting together with smaller groups and, you know, chatting about things. And we may be doing and scheduling some times to do that too over the next month or so. So we'll definitely get back to you on that, you know, within the next week or so. So anyway, that's the wrap up, I think, right? Okay. So as I said, next steps we've completed today, August 5th, late September. Repair path forward. Numbers ranged roughly, hopefully. Please give us some flexibility here because we're kind of hoping we can accomplish that. And then in addition to that, at the end of September, the Kingsway Trust, you know, will present their thoughts about the pool, the buildings, and the golf course and that sort of thing. And then in late October, we'll firm things up. Again, I hope that that's the schedule we could keep. We're going to do everything we can do to make that happen because I know everybody is very anxious and that sort of thing. So we want to try to bring this to a conclusion as fast as we can. So with that, thank you so much, and we appreciate your time, and we'll see you at home.